I guide patients like you every single day. I listen to the struggles that they go through, their pains, and their health challenges that we need to overcome. One of the first questions that I always ask, which is always met with some surprise: how's your sleep? It's so easy as a healthcare practitioner or a weight loss coach to get caught up with what we think is the most important thing that our clients and patients need to focus on in order to have successful, lasting weight loss and optimal health. After over 20 years of working with clients and over 10 years of clinically working with patients, getting down to the nitty-gritty and figuring out what I think is the best thing that they have to do to be successful. What I figured out is that the most important thing to implement is what you can initially adhere to. Besides lifestyle interventions that you personally have interest in, sleep optimization is almost always one of the things that I like to get started on because of the return on investment being so powerful. It is so much easier to implement sleep optimization and reap the benefits of your efforts compared to exercise, diet, and so many other lifestyle interventions. So in this video, we will dive into the most important and powerful science-backed options that you can do to improve your sleep quality now. And I need to mention that these are 100% free.
For so many years, I experimented with different strategies in the morning to set me up for the perfectly executed morning routine. And, after a lot of trial and error, I realized that the best thing you can do for a high productive day and a great start is a perfectly executed sleep routine.
So yes, sleep, optimizing your sleep is extremely critical for optimal health. I want to start by showing you guys this tweet here from Dr. Huberman. He is a well-renowned neuroscientist. If you guys haven't heard of Andrew Huberman, please check him out. One of the few podcasts that I very much endorse. And I think this tweet says it all in terms of the many different components of your health that sleep will have a dramatic and positive impact on. Now, you maybe haven't heard of Dr. Andrew Walker. Maybe you have, because he's starting to become more popular himself. He actually just had this awesome 6-episode series with Dr. Huberman, over freaking 15 hours of amazing intel on sleep optimization. And to quote Dr. Andrew Walker, sleep is the single most effective thing that we can do to reset our brain and body health each day. This point is really important to drive in because there's so many things, right? There's so many different tenets and pillars of optimal health, and they're all important. We got to optimize our stress levels. We have to have a good balanced diet so that we don't have any micronutrient deficiencies. We have to work out. We have to throw in some fasting, yada, yada, yada. But I love sleep optimization because the ROI, the return on investment, is so powerful. It doesn't take a tremendous amount of effort to get your sleep in, to improve your quality of sleep. And in this video, by the end of it, I hope you'll agree with me that we gotta make these changes to our environment and the way that we look and approach sleep. And then you'll continue for the rest of your life to reap the benefits of making this one series of changes versus, look, working out, of course we can get more accustomed to, for example, and used to eating better diets, eating nutritious food, stopping the quick reach for junk food. But you notice about exercise and diet, those continue to require repetitive willpower and determination from you, because there's always going to be those moments where you want to give in and the goodies are around you. It's easy to be lazy. But once you get sleep in, it's second nature. It doesn't require more effort. And so that's why I truthfully look at sleep optimization as giving us the best return of our investment in terms of things that you should do now and things that you could implement now. Let's dive into some key components here. And I want to show you some research to go along with each category. First, physical health. So optimizing your sleep is going to help you regulate hormones that control hunger and control appetite. Now, this is obviously going to be huge when it comes to impairing your ability to lose weight. And our ability to achieve a good, healthy weight is the first roadblock to optimal health. And so getting a good night's sleep means that we're going to have a better hormonal pattern. So we won't be as hungry all the time. So we won't have as many cravings working against us. Secondly, cognitive function. There is massive improvement in our cognition, our ability to consolidate memories, solve problems. Decision making is either dramatically improved or dramatically impacted in a negative way because of how important sleep is for our ability to do those things. Finally, emotional resilience. I want to quote Dr. Walker again because he again is in case you guys don't know him again, like he's becoming a really famous sleep scientist, and he had that series with Dr. Huberman that I talked about earlier. To quote him directly, the best bridge between despair and hope is a good night's sleep. And I think that that's so powerful because what's so interesting when you look at psychological disorders and mental disorders, you almost always see a common trend of disrupted and dysregulated sleep. So is it sleep that's the basis of all mental disease? I mean, we're nowhere near that point of saying that, but I think there's enough evidence in front of us and a correlation between the two to know that they are definitely intertwined, and sanity can be the difference between a good night's sleep or not. Okay, so let's go over some tenets, if you will, things that we have to understand, some sleep goals, and then we can get into the things that are very actionable that you can start to improve your sleep right away. First of all, quantity of sleep. So we have to get 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep. This is the ideal. This is the goal. So 7 to 9 hours is we're talking your average adult here, right? So 18 years to 40, 50 years old, we need 7 to 9 hours. Some people can get away with a little bit less. Some people will actually need more. You do have to listen to your body. And unfortunately, we don't have a very effective test to tell us exactly how much your body needs. We're going to talk more about it later, but essentially feeling tired after a full night's sleep is one indication that you're potentially not getting enough sleep. So don't shortchange yourself. Somewhere between 7 to 9 is a good range for all of us. Secondly, quality. So quality has two pieces to it. Okay. So quality of sleep would be and you can think with this, right? How many times were you woken up or not? Did you have a nice clean sleep the entire night, or were you awoken by the dogs? Even if you were able to go back to sleep, even if you were able to go back to sleep quickly, if you were awoken more than once or even more, then that will affect the quality of your sleep. So we want clean, undisturbed, smooth sleep. Now, the second part of quality that's important to understand is the part that we can't literally put our mind on it because we have no consciousness over this. You can have complete sleep with zero disruptions and have a lowered quality of sleep. And we refer to this as almost like this architecture of your sleep, if you will, because you have various stages of sleep. And I'll do a separate video talking about sleep science to get into that, which is really awesome if you want to nerd out into that. But essentially, there are certain patterns and certain brain waves that we want to see your brain go into every 90 minutes or so. That's the average length of time, although it varies person to person for a sleep cycle. And so there's this beautiful and ideal architecture of brainwave patterns. And so you could have a night of what appeared to be clean, high quality sleep, and yet have disrupted quality or architecture due to things like caffeine and alcohol. So one big piece that it's worth mentioning right now is not having to urinate during the night more than once in order for us to get quality of sleep. And we have a section that we're going to get into later regarding urination and how we can minimize this. But even urination, you want to minimize. This is how important and this is how powerful good quality sleep is. Many of you have trackable devices, and I'm all for it. I think it's great, whether it's the Oura Ring or whatever you're using, devices that give you some sort of sleep score, right? It's an overall, because there's so many different metrics that these devices are tracking, and then they will give you a final score, and generally it's 0 to 100%. So we want to shoot for a sleep score above 85%, but you have to be careful to not develop any anxiety from the excitement or anticipation or dread of what your score is going to be. This is a real thing. And now we have an identifiable medical condition that exists from people who are literally, and like I said, either super excited for their score or dreading because they know how bad it is. So we want to step a bit back from the daily checking of this and find some sort of pattern, maybe twice a week or once a week. And that's it. because we don't want to impair our sleep simply from the anticipation of the score. I know that sounds funny and I know that sounds silly, but it absolutely can happen. So please be careful with that. Use that once or twice a week opportunity to really dig into how the week was, identify and improve your sleep score as much as you possibly can. Timing is another big piece, and there is something called chronotypes. So a chronotype is essentially at this point, from what we understand, proven by your genetics, right? So you essentially just inherit a certain chronotype. And this is more of your, am I a morning person or am I an evening person? And I know a lot of you probably can quickly identify, oh, very well, I'm a morning person, or no, very well, I can't even function in the morning, but I can stay up very late past traditional bedtime hours, and that's my prime, right? So many of you already know this, but it's important that we adapt a sleep schedule that mirrors our chronotype. This is very, very important because the more that we can mirror our chronotype, the better improvement we're going to get in the most ideal scenario for the highest quality of sleep. This will help mirror a strong circadian rhythm. And a circadian rhythm refers to our body's internal clock. We have an internal clock, which each cell in our body, and this is just what I love about the human body and how brilliant of a design it is and how much more we have to still learn about the human body. But we do have a clock that is kept very tightly, and every cell in your body can detect this clock, and we call this a circadian rhythm. And so sleeping in a schedule that mirrors your chronotype will really solidify and make improvements to a strong circadian rhythm. If you aren't sure what your chronotype is, there's this test called the Morningness Eveningness Questionnaire, or the MEQ. And by the way, guys, we'll link to all the things that we're mentioning in the description so that you guys don't have to worry about figuring out exactly what they are right now. Just enjoy the video. But the MEQ is a quick test, should take you about 5 or 10 minutes max, and it'll tell you what your chronotype is. This is a big deal. We want to do our best to adhere to a sleep schedule that conforms to our chronotype. I can tell you guys right now, I am a morning type. I've always known this. Kind of funny story. Before I knew this, well, actually way back when I finished high school, my first year of college was the first time I was presented with an option of taking classes in the evening. And I don't know why it sounded really cool to me. So I remember registering for my first class, freshman year of college, 7 p.m. Professor starts lecturing, and I fell asleep the first day. And teacher was naturally pissed, and that's not normal for me. And this happened probably 25 to 30% of the time I would fall asleep. And so teacher naturally thinks I'm this bum that doesn't give a hoot about my class or anything like that. But no, this was I didn't know what was going on. Well, lo and behold, I realized later I'm not trying to learn anything after 7 p.m. I might still be working, but I am a 6 a.m. morning riser, and I go to bed at 10 p.m. and I've been doing that for as long as I can remember. So again, these chronotypes are very real. And so if we're not positive, that test will definitely help us understand where we fall. Okay, finally, let's talk about melatonin. I want you to understand melatonin's role in sleep, because many of the things that we're doing and that we're going to talk about here in these strategies to improve your quality of sleep are affected by melatonin. So melatonin is a hormone that is released to prompt your body and ready it for a good night's sleep. And many things affect melatonin, and melatonin affects many things, but this is the overview and this is the generalization. And that's all we need to understand. Now, light is one of the big things that will affect melatonin, right? So again, think ancestral times, there's no electricity, sun sets, we are exposed to less and less light. Therefore, melatonin production increases and our body is prepped for a good night's sleep. And when the sun rises, we are exposed to light, specifically blue light, and blue light will decrease that production and decrease levels of melatonin, which prompt us for wakefulness and energy levels and production. And so melatonin is one of the most powerful hormones, and we will be talking about it many times throughout the strategies. Okay, let's get into fixing some sleep, guys. So number one, keeping a consistent sleep schedule. Now, I will do my best to give you guys these tidbits, these topics, these categories in order of the most powerful down the totem pole. It's going to differ person for person, and you're going to have individual categories that are a bigger issue for you. So modify appropriately. But If I'm saying this first, it's because this is the most powerful, generally speaking, thing for us to do to optimize our sleep. So sleep schedule, sleep schedule, sleep schedule. So this is so important because this is what sets in that circadian rhythm that we started talking about earlier. Remember, we have this clock, our body operates off of this schedule, and this will affect the production or lack thereof of certain hormones or cause certain things to release when they shouldn't, and yada, yada, yada. So the more patterned that we can be in our life in terms of sleep, the better that we will sink in a solid circadian rhythm, and the most we can improve our health. So what we know at this point is plus or minus 30 minutes. Now, I know this becomes a bit of an issue when we think about the weekends, right? And I'm sure all of us, especially if you're young and watching this, are saying, Dr. Jones, I'm not going to be going to sleep at the same time Friday night and Saturday night as I am the rest of the week. I understand that. And regardless of your age, this is the reality. This is what the science shows us, and this is how important sleep is. And so for us, as we mature and we grow up and we start to respect our body more and more, this needs to be implemented to the best of your ability. Look, I get it. You should have a social life. You should have some fun. But just knowing that the more often we can go to bed on Friday night and Saturday night at the same time, again, we get to reap all those benefits. And it's not like we lose time, guys. So do with that information what you can, but going to sleep consistently as much as you possibly can is going to sink in that circadian rhythm and make dramatic improvements. Okay, bedtime routine. So having a routine that you install, that you build, that you develop is very, very powerful. Somewhere between 90 minutes to 2 hours prior to your actual bedtime, you want to start a routine. And so I literally have an alarm that goes off 2 hours before bedtime. So remember, I talked about my bedtime being 10 p.m. My alarm goes off at 8 p.m. every single night. And right on the screen, it says, as you saw in the beginning of this video, dim lights and wind down. So I have this entire process of which I do where I begin to dim the lights. This is a very big deal because one of the keys to a good night's sleep is not expecting your body to just jump straight into bed and actually be able to fall asleep that quickly. That could maybe happen in a situation where you are extremely sleep deprived, but when you're not and you're trying to keep a good sleep schedule in, there actually needs to be a process that you do, and giving yourself 90 minutes to 2 hours to where you're actually doing something to your body can really set the tone for a good night. So first thing I do when the alarm goes off is I start my dimming process. And as you can see, I'm walking around the house, I'm dimming all the lights. So essentially my motto is this: if I'm not going to need to be in the area later, lights go off. If I'm going to be in the area later, I dim it. That's it. So either off or dim. And especially lately, the last year or so, you'll find me still working at 8 p.m. And so even in my workstation, I have a different light bulb because I don't have a dimmer in my office, and I switch over to that bulb. And we're just about to talk about the different ways that you can go about dimming your lights. But again, the process of decreasing the amount of light, this is why we mentioned melatonin earlier, will then allow your body to start producing larger amounts of melatonin, which are going to be essential for falling into sleep. Okay, so how do we accomplish this? How do we dim lights? There is a measurement of brightness for light bulbs that we call flux. And so you want to get low flux or dimming bulbs. As you can see here in this pictures, let's start with low flux bulbs. Super cheap. You can get them from Amazon. They're also known as orange or red bulbs. Essentially, what's different about these bulbs is they have a low percentage, almost non-existent if we go really far on the spectrum. They have less blue light. It is blue light within the spectrum of light that's going to trigger the most negative reaction towards melatonin. So we want to reduce blue light. We want to reduce blue light as much as we can. So if you have a situation where you don't have a dimmer, these low flux bulbs are nice, and you can get a little fixture from Amazon for $15. And that's what I actually do for my bed. As you saw, next to my bed, I have a little light fixture. So I turn off the main light and I just change it to a low flux bulb. Either situation is going to work. A dimming bulb, as you can see here, a couple bucks more, not that much more pricey, but having a fixture with the dimming ability is what can get more pricey. And sometimes you're renting and you don't have the situation of being able to replace the entire fixture. So the convenience is there, but even if you have no dimming options at all, having little light fixtures with those lower flux bulbs in the areas, and for me, I don't know about you guys, but my office, the bathroom, the kitchen, because I do my bedtime supplement routine, those are the areas, and then the bed, because I'll be transferring to my room. The rest of the house, lights are off. Another aspect of light is the height of which the light is hitting us. I know, very, very interesting. But when light comes from the ceiling or above us, there is more stimulation to certain receptors in your eye that stimulate another hormone called melanopsin. And for all intents and purposes, melanopsin works in a fashion similar to the way melatonin does in terms of what it does, but it's the opposite side. So stimulating melanopsin will cause a wakefulness. And lights that come from above us, like ceiling lights that are pushing down, that are flashing down on us, are going to stimulate more melanopsin. So if you have the option, having light from your red bulbs come from more of a lower level, this is where fixtures can come in, is also nice to decrease the amount of stimulation in the eyes that can affect melanopsin in a way that we need, that we would like to improve quality of sleep. Okay, so now let's talk screen time. In a perfect world, in a perfect scenario, you're no more TV, no more devices, you're chilling, you're relaxing, you're spending quality time with your loved ones, and you're reading a book. Now, does Dr. Jones do that? No, because Dr. Jones has a lot of work on his table, and I'm sure many of you can appreciate that as well. And so we want to do our best. The gold standard is to stop working, start relaxing, start socializing, winding down, relaxing, reading a book. But here's what we can do to minimize the damage if we have to continue to interact with electronic devices. So first of all, this program for computers, you guys can download it. It's called Flux. It's completely free. It is an awesome software that automatically, you just tell it either, it could even figure out what geographical location you are in based off of sunrise and sunset, or you can give it a certain schedule, but it'll automatically dim within your monitor, it'll reduce the blue light when we get towards closer to bed, and increase the blue light during the day when we actually want it, because believe it or not, we do want blue light during the day because that's what we naturally happens. So Flux is awesome for working on a computer, and it's kind of trips you out a little bit because you'll be working and then all of a sudden you just see the screen start to go red, and when you first start using Flux, it might kind of catch you off guard. So just remember, Flux is going to do that. I wanted to interrupt for a quick minute and let you guys know about the permanent weight loss guide that I've created for you guys. I'll link to it in the description. It covers 3 of the most common roadblocks that people encounter on their weight loss journeys. Number 1, weight loss plateaus, how to bust through them. Number 2, how to start a prolonged fasting regimen, but do it safely and do it correctly to optimize results. And then finally, medication independence, specifically semaglutide, tirzepatide. If you're looking to save the most amount of money, this guide and this program will help you wean off of it. I'll link to it again at the end of the video here in the notes. And now back to the show. Okay, so we have this awesome feature in smartphones that I'm sure a lot of you weren't aware. I actually thought it was pretty cool when I discovered this, but we have built-in features within our smartphones to be able to reduce the amount of exposure. As you can see, let's start with iOS's. Sorry, Android lovers out there, but I am an iOS guy myself. And so as you can see here in this clip, this is how you actually go into your settings, just a couple quick changes, and you can actually fix your phone and set it up so that it has an option to look at, almost like a setting that you can toggle on and off to be able to go from normal to severely reduced blue light. Then there's a shortcut there, as you can see, so that all we got to do is triple click on the right of your phone to be able to now go back and forth. There's no automated way that I'm aware of that it automatically does that, like the way Flux does in this particular feature, but this is part of your bedtime routine. Go to your phone and toggle back to blue light mode. As you can see, blue light blocking mode, aka red mode, back and forth. Okay, so for Android lovers and Android peeps out there, Flux, the same app that we talked about for desktops, can actually be downloaded on Androids, not iOS. From what I haven't been able to try it myself, but from what I've understood, it doesn't work as smoothly as it does on computers. So play with that. You can also do some research. There are other programs entirely that do the same concept. So attempt to find an app that works where you can because I strongly recommend that you do this as part of your bedtime routine, is if you have to interact with your phone, you want to be able to toggle to blue light blocking mode. Now, if all else fails, let's say you can't get the ideal scenario, you can always opt for one of these bad boys right here. So these are called red glasses, aka blue light blocking glasses. So these are awesome. These work in a pinch. And this is actually what I used to do for the longest time until I felt really comfortable that I have my entire scenario optimized. So I don't have to actually put these on anymore. But unless you have every little thing that we talk about in this list, and by the way, folks, this is a very comprehensive list I'm giving you. If you don't have everything set in yet to minimize that exposure to blue light, then these work in a pinch, and you can get them. My favorite brand is actually, what is this, Swanick, and I don't even have an affiliation with them. I think they're called Swanwick. I don't have a relationship with them, but they're great company. Honestly, I'm sure there's a couple great companies, but definitely put these on for those 2 hours prior to bed to minimize our exposure to blue light as much as possible. Additionally, as part of the bedtime routine, now we want to start to decrease our temperature in preparation for good sleep. We're going to talk about temperature in more details here in a little bit. And ideally, hopefully you have a thermostat that you can schedule. So this is all automatic. But in case you don't, manually decreasing the AC could be one way. Just make sure you're starting the process, because it does take time to cool the house down, especially if you let your house go up as high as, the high 70s or 80s. It'll take a tremendous amount of time to get the house cool enough. So if AC is part of your cooling process, you want to consider whether or not it belongs in this bedtime prep process. Finally, and certainly, not to say it's the least important, we got to wind down, folks. And I know yours truly, I'm guilty of this, but winding down means stop working. Now, the variable here is everybody's work is different and carries with it different stress levels. And so be your own judge here, but stimulating activities, stimulating work, stressful stuff is what needs to decrease. So probably not the best time to schedule a conversation with your loved one, especially if you know there's a possibility that this conversation can go south. If it's something that you guys are essentially trying to agree on and you don't. And I know you might be thinking, well, Dr. Jones, like, that's the only time I have to talk to my loved one. You'd be surprised. How about you go to sleep and you wake up an hour early? That way, if the conversation does go awry, at least that stress and cortisol spike that an argument gives you is actually beneficial, because you, believe it or not, want a cortisol spike in the morning, but you don't want it in the evening. So we want to avoid as much as possible, or even the possibility of any sort of stress creating scenarios. Generally speaking, work is stressful. So we got to start decreasing our workload. We start winding down. This would be a good time to introduce your stress management techniques. I'll have other content and videos I'm going to make about stress management. But if you're not doing an activity that handles stress to your body, you need to implement it. 5 minutes a day can be a game changer in terms of how your body handles the stress. And I don't know about you guys, but I would argue that 90 to 95% of people out there are carrying extra stress ever since COVID. A lot of people are just trying to survive between the difficulties, financial issues and burdens and work and all that kind of stuff. So my favorite, as you can see here, is breath work, but there's plenty of them. Meditation is another common one that comes to mind. Breath work. There's all these various apps, but get something, get a routine of it. And I prefer doing it closer to bedtime to help prep the body for more winding down. All right, now bedtime is upon us. So now that we're ready to hop off to bed, we want to eliminate all light. Okay. So as you can see here, you walk into the room, lights out, you go to bed. You want to block out all 100% of light, or as close to that as humanly possible. So blackout curtains come to mind. If you don't have those already, they're very cheap. You can get them on Amazon. They block out a tremendous amount of light from outside. And then a lot of us, unfortunately, do have, and we don't think about it, but we have devices with small amounts of lights emanating from them. So you want to hide those devices, physically maneuver them so it blocks the light from you, or even use some black duct tape as well. So just like blue light blocking glasses, if you aren't able to block out all of the light, these little guys right here, these coverings, take a look at the middle. As you can see here, there's some thickness to them, right? This isn't a cheap eye mask. I mean, it's still relatively cheap. You can get them for $10, $15, but you want to get a good high quality sleep mask and utilize that sucker so that you can block out as much light as you possibly can. Again, we know the benefits of light and blocking it before bedtime. Put your phone into airplane mode. There's absolutely no reason why you would need your phone on cellular mode. I shouldn't say absolutely, but in most cases, because we have Wi-Fi. The number one reason is, well, I need to be able to have, in case of emergency, someone to be able to call me. So I highly suggest you coordinate with your loved ones and have a way to receive phone calls via Wi-Fi. And with iOS's, that's innately built in, but with other devices, there are plenty of other applications like WhatsApp or even Facebook or Telegram where you can make phone calls just as reliably through Wi-Fi. Now, the whole conversation about why we're trying to reduce our phone time near us gets into a category referred to as electromagnetic frequencies, or EMF. And EMF exposure is a topic for discussion. It's very controversial. Many will argue that there's no health implications and that it's completely fine. I don't know about you, but I will never be walking around with Bluetooth devices between my head for hours upon a day. And look, we can have this argument over and over and over, but I always, and this is my same argument with supplements, guys, in terms of are they worth the investment? Are they helping us? Or are they not? Why are we putting such a fight, other than money, and by the way, we're talking about the opposite of money because it costs money to buy these devices. But in any case, that's the defense for supplements. But why are we making such an argument here to not be safe? I would rather find out 10 years later that I was wrong and that these devices were completely safe and I could have been more convenient. I could have had a higher level of convenience in my life than find out I was right. Look back the last 10 years and wonder why my current state of unoptimal health, or God forbid, medical conditions, and wonder if it was because I had a pair of AirPods on my head for freaking 6 to 8 hours a day. So it's not that hard to avoid the EMF exposure if we put a little bit of effort in. So number one, do not have the Wi-Fi router in your bedroom where you sleep. For crying out loud, put it somewhere on the other side of the house where you spend the least amount of time as possible. So if you work from home, you work in the office, try to have it not in your office either. So don't be near the Wi-Fi device as much as possible. Do not use Bluetooth devices if you don't have to. I use Bluetooth when I work out, and that's the only time I use it is when I work out. So avoid that as much as possible. I use wired headphones as much as I possibly can, and then putting my phone into airplane mode every single night. Do with that information what you will. I always argue, for the sake of my loved ones and for you guys out there, better safe than sorry. Okay, so now let's talk about temperature. So we know this by now, and there's been a lot of commotion about temperature, which is why you probably have seen so many devices being sold and advertised for lowering your temperatures. But what we know that is optimal temperature for your body to get into good sleep is about 67 degrees Fahrenheit or 19.4 Celsius. So many devices and many ways that you can accomplish this. We talked about it earlier, central AC, which might not work in many cases if you have loved ones that you live with and they don't want it to be as cold as you do. And so that can be an issue. Secondly, you can opt for a portable AC unit for your room. If that doesn't work because maybe you're sleeping with a loved one and they don't want it as cold as you, then that's where we can get into these various devices. As you can see here, there's many units. There's even one called BedJet, which shoots air over your body, which is pretty interesting. I haven't tried that, but most of them, the way they work is they circulate cold water in this pad that you sleep on, and it goes into the machine, and it drops temperature again, and it circulates it, and it's pulling heat off your body. So whatever you got to do, but you want to get that temperature down to 67 or colder. Now, what's interesting though is it's not just about getting cold enough for great sleep. It's actually the process of cooling off. Meaning, if you were already at 65 degrees or even colder for several hours of the day as you progressed into bedtime, you might not fall asleep as well, or you might not have as good of a quality of a sleep as you possibly could. There's something about the process of actually cooling off about 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit or about 1 degree Celsius in that time span, that hour or two prior to bed, which preps your body for a good night's sleep. This is why science has already proven that taking a nice warm bath, closer to bed will put you into better sleep, as you can see here in the study. So we got to remember that we don't want to be cold all day. We want to actually be at whatever ambient comfortable temperature you're at and plan for a cool off period closer to bed, which is why now I mentioned earlier having some sort of attempt to start that cool off process when that bedtime routine starts, when that alarm goes off, so that you can actually cool off as you relax and get ready for a great night's sleep. Okay, so just as much as a great night's sleep preps you for a phenomenal start to your day, guess what? A phenomenal start to your day will prep you for a good night's sleep. So sunlight to your eyes as soon as you possibly can each and every morning is one of the most powerful things you can do, especially when we're talking about the context of what to do in the morning. It will do many things for us, suppressing melatonin production. It will stimulate a stronger cortisol pulse. And remember, cortisol is a stress hormone that we actually have a 24-hour rhythm to, higher in the morning, less in the evening. So we want to strengthen that cortisol in the morning. And it also helps to reset our circadian rhythm, meaning, for example, if we had a day or time off where we traveled or we just had poor disrupted sleep and our circadian rhythm is off, doing this morning routine resets it back and anchors it to exactly where we want. So again, we talked about how powerful circadian rhythm is, which is why the very first tip I gave you was staying on a sleep schedule. 10 minutes on a great day. Remember, don't look directly at the sun. Please, I don't want you to get hurt, but looking towards the sun is plenty. This will not work through windshields. This will not work through windows. We have to be outside and get direct exposure to what are called photons, the particles of light that are leaving the sun and hitting our body. Up to 30 minutes on a really strong overcast day. Now, artificial light can come into play to help us for many situations. If you wake up very early prior to the sun rising, then getting some artificial light till you can get outside can be a very powerful tool. Or let's say you can't get any light at all, like you can't get outside at all for whatever reason, then artificial light is all you will have, okay? And that can be beneficial if you get the right type of artificial light. So we talked about a measurement of light earlier called lux. So there are lights out there, fixtures that reach 10,000 lux. And so you want to have exposure to 10,000 lux to get the next best thing. It'll never replace what actual sun exposure will do, but it's the closest thing that we can mimic. Be wary though, because a really good fixture will cost you about $100 to $150. We're going to link to our favorite device, but many devices can get away with saying 10,000 lux, but what they're not explaining to you, what you don't understand, is there's a certain amount of power that affects whether the 10,000 lux is actually going to reach your eyes, right? Meaning the device needs to be significantly stronger to get 10,000 lux to you if you are 3 feet away compared to 2 compared to 1. And so many devices say 10,000 lux, and they're assuming that you're holding it like this. And so this device is awesome because you can put it on your desk, and as long as we're within a couple feet, relatively close, it does a good job. It's not too expensive. And so I use this as much as I possibly can, especially if I'm not going to be able to get out. But I've gotten really good because I see how much of an impact this makes into my health. I also am a big believer of walking backwards. And so as you can see here, I'm walking backwards. I'm directing this backwards treadmill towards outside of my house. So I'm getting sun exposure. I'm double dipping. You could do that. You can walk backwards outside. You could do some exercise, whatever it takes. But let's be creative here. And let's double dip both in some sort of other habit, whether it's stress management or exercise, alongside eye light exposure. Now, let's discuss if you can't turn off your brain. This is going to, and I'm guilty of this as well, this is going to affect you whether or not you are unable to fall asleep at all because your mind is racing, or like many people, you wake up somewhere between 2 to 3 a.m. and you're sitting there, can't go to sleep because your mind is also racing. In either scenario, we treat this the same way. We have to relax as much as we possibly can to get ourselves back into sleep. So just like we talked about earlier, things that come to mind, breath work, meditation. Now, here's an interesting thing called mind walks, and there's actually literature to back this up. But a mind walk is a mental strategy where you're laying there and you're just thinking to yourself a walk that you've done hundreds of times, and you have a really good visual representation, imagery of what's going on. So very carefully and very methodically put yourself through that walk and try to be as slow and steady in that walk as possible, looking around, because this brain of ours is an awesome, powerful thing, and you can literally put yourself there without actually being there, and look at as much imagery as you possibly can. This is why I want it to be a walk that you've done many times so that we can actually pull in more sensory detail. And before you know it, many people report being able to fall asleep before they even had any conscious awareness and waking up. So this is a very powerful strategy. There's also something called the NSDR protocol. You can hop and find it on Google, or excuse me, YouTube, by typing in NSDR and find it. It should be the ones that show up as the top 3 to 4 search results on YouTube. Whatever works for you, the NSDR, the Yoda Nidra is also a good one too as well. Breath work, meditation, just find a way to relax and try to get your mind off of whatever it is, particularly stuck on or fixated on. Now, at the same time, not something that you can do in the moment, or nor should you do that in the moment, but a completely different approach towards handling this issue as well, outside of the context of actually being stuck there and unable to fall back asleep, would be taking a couple minutes. And if you are somebody who suffers with this repetitively during the day, take some time and see if there's a revolving theme. Usually, not always, if this is happening to somebody, it is because there is some stress, there is some issues, or are some issues that you are trying to subconsciously handle and make sense of. And so taking some time to actually solve the thing that you find yourself perplexed and pondering when you don't want to might actually be what needs to get done in order to solve this problem. Now, that could be the situation, or it could just be more of a physical thing. And the other strategies that we talked about, implement them both, see what works for you. If you unfortunately catch yourself in this situation, please, oh please, do not look at the clock. And I get it. Look, you're sitting there, you're wrestling back and forth, you're frustrated, you got a meeting at 6 a.m. Well, what time is it? You look at the clock and you go, oh my God, it's 1 a.m. And guess what that does? It never helps. It's never a good thing. No good ever comes from grabbing the phone and looking at it when you're laying in there, because I promise you, it's not 15 minutes till 6 a.m. So we just need to continue to sleep, continue to relax. Otherwise, we will get some very bad anxiety that could spiral out of control and get much more worse over time if we continue, because now we're thinking about it. Now it's something more to fixate on and much more difficult to relax and fall asleep. With that in mind, this relates to another concept, associating your bed with sleep. So this is interesting, and I bring it up now because it kind of plays into being stuck there trying to fall asleep, right? We do our best to fall asleep and really work on it and use those mental strategies that we just taught you. But staying there for hours upon hours, and you're going to have to guess because I just told you don't look at the clock. So without looking at the clock, you will have an idea to some degree of being able to discern whether it was 15 minutes or whether it was 2 hours that you've been lying there. You may not think that, but your body does have an internal clock that it can use, and just give it a whirl, test it out later and let me know. But you can actually guess sometimes how much time has lapsed with a simple guess. So you want to do your best to associate your bed with sleep and not associate it with wakefulness. It's a very, very fascinating new sort of field that they're looking at, because one of the things that they do for people, true insomniacs, is help them develop a better relationship with their bed in terms of associating it with more sleep. So we want to keep this in mind. And this situation of laying there trying to go to sleep comes to mind. So after a certain amount of time has lapsed, where you can confidently say it's been more than 20 minutes, but you're not sure exactly how long, it doesn't matter. Once you realize it's definitely been more than 20, get out of your bed. And I know that might sound a little bit weird, because you're like, well, won't getting up make me more awake? It will on the short term, but because of how powerful the relationship that your body makes with the bed, we have to deal with that. And so we want to get out of bed. We want to find another environment where we can relax, just like we did in those 2 hours. Read a book, meditate, breath work, whatever it does, whatever it is. Avoid light as much as possible. Use the low flux bulbs as much as possible. Relax, get yourself tired again. And once you feel tired again, go back to your bed. Don't fall asleep outside in the separate environment because that can lead to an association with another area of your house with sleep. So this is a bit of a process. I know this is tedious, but these little tricks, these little tweaks can go a long way. So leave your bed, get tired, come back, and go back asleep. Who doesn't love a good nap, right? I know I do, right? Let me know in the comments how much you love your naps. But we have to implement some rules based off the science if we want to have maximal sleep quality. So keep your naps to a maximum of 20 to 25 minutes. The reason for this is because we have these certain cycles of sleep. And again, I told you we're going to do a whole nother sleep science video, but essentially your brain waves start off for more of this awake stage, and they go from stage 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to deep sleep to REM sleep, and then you come out of it and you repeat the cycle, right? So more awake down to deep sleep. We have that REM sleep where we're dreaming, and then we repeat the cycle over and over and over. If you were awoken, say by an alarm clock, for example, in the middle of a sleep pattern, you will be more groggy, you will have more disturbed sleep, and you won't be as well rested if you were to be awakened right when your 90-minute cycle is timed right at the beginning. Then you will have the most amount of energy and you won't have to overcome the grogginess that was just created. Now, side note, unfortunately, stay away from all those devices that try to time your awake time based off of sleep cycles. Even though I just talked about sleep cycles being real, the reality is the 90 minutes that we like to assume that it, and what we used to think it was, varies wildly person to person and even gender. So it's impossible to determine what your pattern, the number of minutes that your cycle is. But we do know on average takes about 25 minutes before anybody gets into any deeper stages. So keeping your naps capped at 20 to 25 max, we can generally say most people won't get into those states that would create that grogginess if you were awoken by an alarm clock. Also with naps, we want to keep our naps into the earlier mid-afternoon and cut it off. Now, again, if you're tired, why can't I take a nap? Like, naps feel great. They do, but they can work against us. Hopefully by now you understand how important the circadian rhythm is and staying on a sleep schedule. That was the first thing I talked about. Anything that can affect your ability to go to sleep the next night is something that you want to prioritize avoiding. Taking naps closer to bedtime, even when you need them or feel like you need them, after mid and early afternoon are going to increase the chances that you won't get the same restorative sleep the following night. So it is better, even if you are tired now in the afternoon, to suck it up. Don't drink coffee. We're going to talk about that, but suck it up, get to bed at your original schedule. Don't go to sleep earlier. We talked about that, so that you can get the next nights of restorative awesome sleep and keep this great pattern going. Okay, so with that in mind, how do we recover from a bad night's sleep? I was actually surprised on the latest research regarding this because it's myself, I'm guilty of taking extra naps or going to bed early the next day, almost thinking, well, I want to make up the sleep that I lost, and my body's going to probably want to make up a certain percentage of it. But now that I understand the latest research, we don't want to do that for the same reasons that I just talked about. We got to be thinking about the next day in front of us, because a perfect night's sleep the next day is our first opportunity to get back to an optimal pattern, so the disruption that we had before doesn't continue to extend for days on end. So don't overcompensate the next day by excessive napping or excessive caffeine intake or going to bed sooner or sleeping later. Seems logical, but we got to stay away from that. Suck it up for the day as much as you possibly can. Get a great workout the morning, get some more sunlight exposure the morning after a bad night's sleep, get some exercise in the morning. Absolutely can have some coffee in the day. And we're about to talk about caffeine here in a second. Okay, so food is an interesting category because I've always preached that food within 3 hours of bed can disrupt sleep, but it actually might not disrupt sleep as much as we thought. There's some great data here, as you can see from this study here. It's mixed. It's totally mixed. And what we think we understand is the more overweight, the more obese, the more sick, the more unhealthy, the greater the degree that you are likely impacted by eating closer to bed. So I know a lot of us are far from optimal health. So again, I still totally sway with avoiding food for 3 hours before bed. There's also an aspect of your insulin resistance which should be a static thing from how we understand it, insulin resistance being your body's response to insulin. But we also know your insulin resistance actually sways. You're more sensitive in the morning and you're more resistant in the evening. So avoiding carbohydrates, I think for everybody, unless you're trying to gain weight, is a must. And protein is sort of that optional macronutrient where I think if we're on the healthier side, getting protein closer to bed to help hit our protein targets if need be, I think is totally well within reason to say is worth doing. One of the big reasons we want to avoid food is many aspects. It'll increase our fasting time because then we go to bed and that fasting window is increased. It minimizes that oxidative damage that we normally get free radical production from the processing of foods. So again, regardless of where you're at, I think majority of us would benefit from cutting that off, the food intake, 3 hours closer to bed so that we can improve our body's ability to get into good night's sleep. So earlier we talked about our water intake briefly, right? I told you guys I would get into an optimal hydration schedule because if we can minimize the amount of times that we have to urinate, this will be more ideal for better sleep. So there's actually some data on water intake alone being more ideal to shift earlier in the day, meaning this idea that we've learned sipping water throughout the day for optimal hydration is still a true approach. But what we now know is shifting that a little bit earlier. So you start off as soon as you wake up with a higher intake. This is where I say it's okay to pound a glass or two of water because you just woke up. And then let's avoid pounding water for the rest of the day, if pounding is your choice of word. And let's focus on sipping water throughout the day after that glass or two to start off your morning. A good rule of thumb is about 50 to 75% of your weight in ounces is a goal if you're tracking this sort of thing. And stopping your water intake about 3 hours. So same thing when you stop eating. Think of that as the ending of your drinking. You can still sip water as you get closer to bedtime, but the less and less we sip, the less and less we're going to have to get up in the middle of the night to go pee. So definitely shifting your intake of hydration can make a big difference, both for better hydration and for better sleep. Caffeine intake. So caffeine is very, very interesting. So how does caffeine even work? First of all, the way caffeine works is it blocks the uptake of a hormone called adenosine. So adenosine is another type of hormone that has an impact on wakefulness and sleepiness. Okay. So as adenosine is building up, and what happens naturally when we awake is we have lower adenosine levels. And then as we stay awake longer and longer, adenosine levels increase. And as adenosine levels hit this threshold, we get more tired. Okay. But what caffeine does, which is very interesting, is it actually blocks, it gets into those same receptors of adenosine, doesn't stimulate that effect of adenosine, and just sort of blocks adenosine from doing it. So caffeine, unfortunately, I know you don't want to hear this, and I'm a big, as you saw, it's part of my morning routine. I love caffeine. And look, there's plenty of other health benefits of grinding high quality coffee, but caffeine is not giving you energy. Caffeine is borrowing energy from later. And unfortunately, you will pay for that because then what ends up happening when the caffeine wears out, the half-life for most people, it's short unless you have this genetic predisposition to be a slow at breaking down caffeine. Most of us, it's within a couple hours. Then adenosine levels that were building up hit you hard and you get tired. And then some people go for a second or a third cup of coffee and it could be a slippery slope. So now that we understand caffeine intake, it's okay to have a serving of coffee, a cup or two in the morning, but we want to cut it off about 10 hours prior to bed so that we don't have any of this impact our quality of sleep. I don't need to spend much time diving into alcohol. Alcohol, like caffeine, will impact our sleep quality, our sleep architecture. So the reason why we want you cutting off 10 hours of caffeine intake prior to bed is because some of you might even report, Dr. Jones, I could drink a cup of coffee 4 hours before bed and sleep a good night's sleep. But we talked about it earlier. Your perception of a good night's sleep can be very different from the actual quality that your body was able to restore itself, what it was able to experience. And so the architecture, the quality can go beneath your awareness, and you might not be getting as restorative sleep as you would otherwise. So much worse than caffeine, but in the same aspect, alcohol, any alcohol consumption will negatively impact your sleep. So just keep that in mind as you need. If you need more reasons to avoid alcohol, there you go. Okay, finally, I want to get into some supplements. I promised you that everything in this video was going to be free, and basically I almost delivered, right? Supplements are going to cost you money, but hopefully you can tell that was not my goal, is to get you to buy supplements. In fact, even the way I approach this, I want you to use these supplements sparingly. So the first one, magnesium threonate. So you probably heard about magnesium now, like vitamin D. Magnesium is the shiny new supplement that's got its time in the spotlight now, rightfully so, because magnesium plays so many roles and is so required for optimal health. Magnesium threonate is different than any other form. So magnesium glycinate is still my overall favorite form, but magnesium threonate is tied because what differentiates it is you get all the benefits that magnesium glycinate gives you, but magnesium threonate actually passes the blood-brain barrier, which its implications of that effect have a ton of their various impacts to cognition, but we're specifically calming and relaxing. 150 milligrams of magnesium threonate before bed is what I recommend. And truthfully, that can be your source of magnesium, or you can do that in addition to some magnesium glycinate in the morning. Calms, relaxes, and for someone like me that gets that racing mind, magnesium threonate makes a difference. I can tell. I'm okay with you when I don't take it. And I can tell, and I do recommend magnesium threonate as your regular magnesium supplement if, like me, you experience some issues with a racing mind. The rest of the supplements are going to be situational. I don't want you to use them every single day, although there's certainly worse things that you could be quote unquote addicted to, meaning that you feel like you need and you can tell when you don't take it. There are many worse things to feel like you need, but the reason why I would love for you to not need these following supplements every single day is not only to save you money long term, but that raises the bar on yourself to focus on the free lifestyle things and get your quality of sleep so good that you don't need the following supplements. Then you can save those supplements for days when you actually need them. And bam, now you got the best recipe because you got a non-drug based set of supplements that can give you a powerful drug-like feeling, make you drowsy, and help you get a good night's sleep after stressful days or stressful scenarios in your life. Okay, so heavy hitter supplements, glycine, 1 to 2 grams. Glycine will act as an inhibitory neurotransmitter affecting the central nervous system. And so essentially depressing it, calming down that neural activity can be one of the many things that helps prep us for a good night's sleep. Now, best rest formula. So best rest formula, there's many pieces to this formula, but as you can see here, I love it. Mostly the valerian root is a very, very powerful herb for creating some drowsiness, prepping the body. The melatonin levels aren't too high. I'm not a big fan of using too much melatonin. I think we got to get our body's natural production. And given how important melatonin is, taking it in exogenous amounts too much can potentially impact our own internal endogenous production. And many of the other herbs too as well are going to complement valerian root's ability to create drowsiness. And so especially if you don't use glycine and best rest formula continually, oh my gosh, and you try them within 60 minutes, you will be drowsy in most cases. So the way I approach this is very similar to the way I approach stress supplements. Stress supplements I'm referring to, I call as adaptogenic herbs like ginseng, rhodiola, and ashwagandha, for example. So I have an AM supplement, I have an AM routine for my supplements, and I have a PM supplement. You guys saw at the beginning of the video, slapping down my supplements in the morning. I do the same thing every evening. Then I have a box, so I have a container with all my supplements, and I fill those little containers up once a week. Then I have this other side box of situational supplements. And so every PM, I ask myself, how was the day? And if it was anything above a normal day, even if I feel fine in the moment, if my stress levels, if I can see that I had more stress on my plate today, I will take those preemptively, those sleep supplements, just to ensure I don't have a potential for disrupted sleep. Same thing every morning. I ask myself, how was yesterday? Because you should take those stress supplements, those adaptogenic herbs in the morning. They could affect sleep. So I ask myself every morning, how was last night's sleep? How was the day? If I feel off on any aspect, I take those adaptogenic herbs to ensure I have a great start to my day. If you guys enjoyed this video, I strongly recommend you check this one out. It's called GLP-1 Realities. It's a podcast interview where I take a deep dive into our lasting weight loss protocols, uncover why we have such a high level of success, implementing many strategies like sleep optimization, micronutrient deficiencies targeted with supplements, fasting, and everything else that we need for lasting weight loss, guys. Keep it locked and loaded here, and we'll see you guys later.